All right, I am at New York Comic Con, and I ran into Larry Fessenden, who people might know if you've played Until Dawn. He is the flamethrower guy. You might recognize him because, yeah, you look exactly the same, and that's the great thing about that game. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got involved in the game?
Well, if you look around my booth, I'm a film producer and director, and I've made a couple of movies about the Wendigo. And the UK company Supermassive got involved. They asked me to participate in writing the game. And I'm not much of a gamer, but I love independent film and telling stories, and I love the Wendigo. And so I invited my friend Graham Resnick to join me. He's another filmmaker in my stable. Glass Eye Pictures is our production company. And we embarked on 4 years writing the game. And we started on PS3, and Supermassive was the UK company that actually brought the idea of having a Wendigo component in this story. It was already a game with Sony, slasher kind of a game. And they added this new supernatural component, and that's when they got in touch with me because I've done so much sort of Wendigo stuff. And Graham and I passed the interview with a spec script, and then we went on this journey, and it was so great. The characters have changed since the PS3 version. There was a little more exaggeration and a little more comedy, and then when we realized we could get really refined scans of the actors, everything got a little more realistic, and that was really fun.
That's cool. That's cool. So, when did you get into the game? Were you always supposed to be a character in there, or did that come later on?
That's a funny question. I don't know. The guys at Supermassive were always really sweet. They knew that I was an actor, and they because they're in England, they have the impression that I have a fan base, which is, you know, relatively debatable. But, you know, I'm well known as an indie character actor. I've been in a lot of horror movies. I'm usually killed within 2 minutes. Unfortunately, they took that same track, and there's no way to save my character, which if I had a little more muscle during the writing period, I might have given my guy at least one branching moment. But no, and it's funny, I've been at Comic-Con now for 3 days, and all the kids come up and they're like, we couldn't save you. We tried, we you know, and it's just, so if we do a sequel, I'm going to have words with the designers and see if I can let the flamethrower guy last a little longer.
That was cool. Yeah, it was a shocking death. I will say that. It came out of nowhere, and spoilers. A little bit. Yeah, I'll put a spoiler thing before this video starts. But yeah, I was completely taken aback by that, and it blew me away.
Yeah, well, honestly, I think what's amazing about the game is all the deaths are shocking, and it plays into the thing that Graham Resnick and I always try to bring to our horror stories, and why we have some followers as indie filmmakers, is that we try to tell stories that are grounded in reality, so you really like the characters and you feel for them and you want to see them do okay, and then when they reach a terrible end, it is shocking, and that was something that the game wanted to play with. That's what Supermassive was interested in exploring, and I think it's why the kids are having fun, because it's so fun. All the cosplay around here, you really see people who have liked the characters. Even Emily, who everyone hates, I saw, it was great. There was one girl dressed up, and she was a total Emily fan. You could tell she related, and that's, I think, what makes the game great, is you're engaged with the characters, and there's horror and horrible violence. It really, you can feel it. I mean, some of the deaths shocked even us, because, you know, you're writing away, but then when the designers come in and bring it to life, it's pretty great.
Have you been able to play through it a couple times, or was it just...
Dude, I don't even own a PlayStation. That's the irony. I mean, that's why I brought Graham on, because both he's a great writer and a great collaborator and friend, but also he's been playing games since he was a little kid. He's younger than I am, whereas I never really was a gamer. So what I brought to it, I mean, we would work on it where each of us would do a section of the game when we got the assignment, like Chapter 2, and we'd have all the structure that we had to work with, and then we'd go in and we'd talk about the characters. We'd each write alone, and then we'd switch it off and we'd read it to each other, and then we'd what we call punch it up, and we'd sort of redo the whole thing. So it was a really fun collaboration. I've only done it like a lot of the kids, just watched it on YouTube. That's been my way to interact so far, and it's really interesting about what I've learned about video games is that's how a lot of the kids actually experience the game. Some of them come in, they say, we love it, it's so great, and I'm like, oh, who did you kill? And they're like, oh, well, we just watched it. So it's interesting. Here we are getting away from movies, and yet a lot of people are taking it in like a movie, so it's kind of fun.
And that was one of the things, and when I did the review for it, I said I can't wait to see people play this and experience it for the first time and see what their choices are, really.
Well, obviously, this is the whole point of the game, is this, and this is what I like, just philosophically, I think it's so important to think about, the choices you make in life, the little details. And what I like is that in the beginning of the game, it isn't like if you're going to jump across the bridge or run down the hallway to get away from the monsters. It's just like, are you going to say a snarky comment when your friend says something, or are you going to be nice? And I love that. It's those little things, and those do build and branch in a way that they do matter. Basically, if you start being an asshole, you're going to go down a darker path. So it's cool. It's really, I like to say it's philosophical, in some way.
Yeah, I had actually run into that because I played it through a couple times, and one time I tried to go one way with the character, and the other time I tried to go another way. And I got to a point where it was deep in the game, and I was like, I'm going to do this instead, and I got away, and I'm like, oh, no consequences. And I go walking down the hall, and boom, right through the chin. I went, I freaked out.
It's really true. Well, that's what I'm saying. It is very violent, actually.
Yeah.
But, that's why writing the game was so insane, because we'd actually have to remember, like in Chapter 2, this started happening, and then if they did that, then in 3 they'll do, so we would start to have to branch off right from as soon as the decisions were being made. We like to say, and I think it's pretty accurate, especially if you add the 2 games up, that we wrote 10,000 pages of the script. So it's been nuts.
So when you were writing all that, how did you keep all that organized? Did you have just a giant wall and whiteboard and everything, or what were you doing there?
It's funny, we couldn't even have a wall. We ended up living in 2 cities. Halfway through the game, Graham moved to LA, so we didn't even have that ability. The very first scene we wrote, we were in the same room and we were like having fun, and but then by the end we were just doing it over Skype. So what would happen is that Supermassive would provide us with a template for each chapter, and the cool thing is that even they were in over their heads, and sometimes we'd have to catch them and say, well guys, actually that's not quite right, but I think you mean to do this. And then other times, thank God we had this map and we could and then very late in the game, they brought in the psychiatrist or whatever, the Stormare character, and that was a whole other thing. They actually seized on, we knew that it was all about choice, but they came up with the idea of emphasizing it with a butterfly effect later on. And then the totems, all these things, I mean, they were working on it and adding to it and building it and bringing it to us, and we'd push back and right to the last second. It was pretty crazy. And we were constantly saying, when is the release, as some of the fans who were tracking it were saying too, yeah.
Everybody thought it just kind of disappeared at one point because it was shown like a move demo early on.
Dude, we were here at Comic-Con 2 years ago, and we had a whole nice suite, and they were playing it. Yeah, it was a move demo, and a different experience. Also, it was, you can tell, I don't know the terminology as well, but it was first person for a while.
Yeah.
And then it's so much better this way because it feels more like a movie. Yeah.
Well, and that's what impressed me about the way the guys did it. They really, some of the camera angles they chose and the lighting and everything.
Well, it's cool as a filmmaker. It's really fun to watch their editing patterns and the way it's built. And it's also clever because you can see how the choice mechanism can play in, but they just cut to a 2-shot. So one guy says this, then the other, and then they go to the 2-shot, and that's your choice. So you see how it's really nicely crafted. It's a great pleasure for me to watch, and just in those terms. And these 2 guys at Supermassive, I also love the atmosphere and the snow and the lodge and all the set pieces. It was just a lot of fun to work on. And I do love the Wendigo and the Wendigo story. There are a lot of inside jokes like Blackwood Pines, where the lodge is. That's the famous writer Algernon Blackwood, who wrote the Wendigo, an early story about the creature.
That's very cool. So what was it like to don the whole get up to do, because you had to do all the motion capture for that, right?
Yeah, I did facial capture where you have a little camera right on you, like a little GoPro almost, and it's very unflattering. Your face is like on a, and you really walk around in a big green room with the dots all over your face, and you have the gun. It's great. You walk into the closet and you're like, I think I'll take that one, because it's not going to be, they're going to add it later, but you just want something to play with. So I was flamethrower guy. I had to have the very biggest gun they had, and that was great. And you're acting with the other actors were there, and it's crazy. It is like, you know, doing a Star Wars or something. There's no scenery. It's all in your head. So there's something fun about that. A little bit goofy, but to be honest, they did face capture with us, and then they had done some motion capture, body stuff in England, and then it's also, there's some subtle animation, you know, which is cool. You can see that they're not just capturing, they're also adding and tweaking. So it's just an amazing amount of work, and I think one of the reasons it's so good is that those guys really care. Supermassive.
Yeah, it comes across that way. It's really impressive.
A lot of details and a lot of love for the genre. And another Easter egg for us was all our posters from our company are in the cinema room. Yeah.
That's what's in there. Because I was looking at all those posters and I was like, well, these look really cool, and I didn't know where. I didn't even realize that.
Well, of course, none of my movies made it, but House of the Devil.
Yeah.
And another movie shows up twice, which we were all my. You know, I have a stable of filmmakers, and they were all like, "What the hell was the Bitter Feast doing in there 2 times?" But all very fun, and that was another thing. Supermassive. They were always so excited to celebrate Glass Eye Pix and our little company and these kind of movies, you know, which are sort of more authentic and not just slasher films. So, fun.
That's fantastic. Yep. Okay. Thank you very much. I'm getting the wrap-up sign. I'm sorry, I just got flustered there. So thank you very much for talking to us. I want to see if we can get you on the podcast sometime and talk about it as well. Maybe we could go into in depth a little bit more.
Definitely. And for that, we'll want Graham, because he's really got great insight and passion about all this, and we're fun together because he has so much to say because of his experience playing games and, you know, what references he was drawing from. So we'll get him in on that too.
Great, that'd be fantastic. All right, thank you very much. We're out.